everyone. How are you doing today? Thank you for joining us on third session of food preservation series we have been doing since the start of this week. Today we are actually going to talk about drying and basic course on what is drying, how you can dry foods, a varied kind of foods, and basically what techniques you should be using for what kind of food product. So we are going to talk about that. But before I even start, if this is your first time,
how are you doing today?
My name is Patel,
thank you for joining us on third session of food preservation series we have been doing since the start of this week.
I do nutrition,
today we are actually going to talk about drying and
my job
basic
is to
course
bring in
what is drying,
scientific and
how you can dry
research-based
foods, a very kind of
to
foods,
our average audience
and basically what techniques you should be
simplify
using for
things
what
and make
kind
it
of
more
food
relevant
product.
for our audience.
So we are going to talk about it. I'm excited to start. If this is your first time, how are you doing today? Thank you for joining us on third session of food preservation series we have been doing since the start of this week. Today we are actually going to talk about drying, and my job is to bring in what is drying,
if this is your first session, hit like,
a very
and if you have attended my previous session,
basically
hit on that card icon, and so I know that
so we are going to talk about it. I'm excited to start. If this is your first time, how are you doing today? Thank you for joining us on third session of food preservation series we have been doing since the start of this week. Today we are actually
I also want to highlight that this course is an amazing course. If this is your first session, hit like, and if you have attended my previous
basically
hit on that card icon, which I will definitely touch on during this session. However, we group them up into individual categories of drawing herbs, vegetables, and part of the reason I do that is because it can be very, very complex and can take a lot of time, and very spend 2 or 3 hours of your time sitting in that session by session. So once it's private and dedicated, I'm intending to do in-person sessions again. So I'm going to join you there in learning in depth on drawing these alright, so let's start with how we dry food, right? So drying food is very interesting because it's a simple process. It's not as involved as 2 or 3 hours of your time today. After freezing, if there is one method that's the simplest one, it's fine. It requires the minimum equipment, supplies, and ingredients. So people who do not learn cooking in depth and they are slightly scared of, alright, so this is a good method to get into for all of you guys who are a little bit scared of cooking and it reduces the size and the weight of the food. So why is it important to get compact? And what that does is that it helps you carry things around with you and pack more items with you on the go. So it's very portable and travel-friendly, right? So think about if some of you are campers, love to go extra high camps, first things that you want to do with you, any of those food items will be right here. It reduces the size. It also provides you longer shelf life, and it requires less storage space, as I said. And the compact method of preserving food, so because of that, you're able to pack more food, even on the go. So it's very simple, so that's really wonderful. The other thing that I do want to present is how food is actually preserved during drying process. So the very first thing it does it moisture that is existing in that food item, right? So what that does is that it basically removes all the moisture, and so what happens is that the bacteria. Oh, wow. Let me see. Thank you for pointing that out.
The other thing that I do want to.
Okay, is it better now? Is it better? Am I sounding better? Just comment below to just let me know that you are able to hear me correctly now and that you're not getting any feedback. Okay, great. Thank you, Vivienne and Michelle. All right. So let's get back on why we dry food. So basically, it makes the food more convenient to handle and carry with you wherever you travel. So that is very, very good idea. So I started to talk about how the food is preserved when you're drying it. So what drying method does is that it actually helps you to remove moisture from the food. And just like human beings, bacteria loves, most of the bacteria and any microorganism love to thrive on the moisture. And the moment you remove moisture, you are creating an environment which is not as conducive for bacteria and other microorganisms to grow on it. So that is one thing you are doing. The second thing that happens when you're drying food is you are stopping the action of enzymes within that food. So what is enzyme? Let's just talk about that for a second. Enzymes are a chemical compound that is naturally present in the food. What it does is that it alters and takes the food and through different phases, from unripe food all the way to ripe, and then the decay that you see at the end, right? So and it is because of that enzyme you see the transition and changes in the food items in terms of color, texture, appearance, taste, all of it. So enzyme is actually is the chemical compound that's responsible for those changes. The problem happens is that when you're trying to preserve food, you don't want those enzymes to work, right? Because if it were to be working while you are preserving your food and storing it, it's going to continue to go through that decay process, and it will make the food unpalatable, right? So that's why it's very, very important to stop those enzymes at work. And so when you remove the moisture from the food, enzymes cannot work on its own. It needs water to actually work within the food, right? So you're removing moisture, you're creating an environment which microorganisms doesn't like. The second thing is it stops the activity of enzymes, right? So by that, it is going to reduce the spoilage and decay of the food, right? Okay, quick question. This is going to be interesting, and I want you to type it in the comment section. Of all the preservation methods, and I'm going to tell you which one those are: drying, fermentation, freezing, and canning. Which one is the oldest method of preserving food? Think about it. Which one is the oldest method? Again, I'm going to give you the option: canning, fermenting, freezing, and drying. These four methods. Of all these four methods, which one is the oldest one? Drying, okay. Drying, yes. Nicole and Vivian, you are correct. Drying is actually oldest method of preserving food, and actually it was first invented around 12,000 BC. So it is old method, right? So yes, and the newest method of preserving food is actually canning, which was invented in 17 to 1800. So it's interesting to know how far we have been doing in preserving our food. All right. So we know why to dry food. Now let's look at why not to dry food. There are a couple of things you want to remember when you're thinking about drying or getting ready to dry something at home. It is the time variation. Drying is a very time intensive process, not in terms of you investing effort for that long of a time. But in order for you to yield a product, you need to practice patience, because there are products that is going to dry within 1 hour of drying, or it may even take up to 6 days for you to get the dehydrated food items. For example, parsley will take about an hour to dehydrate in the dehydrator, right? So that's quick. However, peaches will take about 48 hours within the dehydrator. Again, you are not constantly putting efforts of drying and processing food at that time. You're just leaving your food in the dehydrator while it's dehydrating. The only thing you're doing is changing maybe trays, flip food, or things like that. So even though it is time investment, you are not committed to that product for that entire period of time. It requires monitoring. As I said before, you have to, after every few hours, if it is 48 hours or a lengthy period of time, you have to go back at certain intervals and just pay attention to what's going on in your dehydrator or whatever method you're using, right? It is not suitable for all food types, and that's very important because there are types of food, and we're going to talk about that later, that is not conducive for dehydrating your food items. So we will discuss that later. All right, so let's think about this. What foods do not dry well? So I want to know what are the food items you think, or food products you think, that will not do well when you're drying them? All right, so now we are going to move to basic steps of drying food. All right, Vivian has already said avocado. Very good. Yes, absolutely, Vivian. Avocados do not do well in dehydrator. They brown, and they do not produce a good product. Very good. Okay, so let's look at, keep your comments coming in, because avocado is not the only one that doesn't do good with drying. So keep your answers coming. I'm going to still transition into different slides, but I'm going to get back to your comment as it pops up. Okay, great. So now let's look at the basic steps of drying foods, right? The very first thing, you're going to clean it, you're going to cut it into even pieces. Very, very important, right? You're going to pre-treat it. So what the pre-treatment means, maybe you are, let's say if you're trying to dry apples, right? Apple slices, you will have to treat it with ascorbic acid. If you attended our freezing session yesterday, then you know that ascorbic acid helps you to prevent browning in your fruits, right? So even during the drying process, you want to prevent the browning of the apples, right? So you're going to treat your apples, peaches, apricot, whatever you choose, with the ascorbic acid. You're going to drain it, and then you're going to move it to a dehydration process. So again, pre-treating, that's just one of them, but there are many other ways you can do it. Like for example, with meat, you can also do sulfuring and curing. Meat needs extra step of dehydration and pre-treatment because it's a potentially hazardous food. So you have to handle that with a lot of care. The third step is to arrange your product, meaning if you are using dehydrator, let's say, a dehydrator will have trays that goes within the dehydrator. So on those trays, you're going to layer your food in a single layer. So you can use that to arrange it. If you were to use oven method, then you're going to use that on the plain baking sheet, right? So you can use it that way too. Follow the tested recipe. Very, very good. This should be on the top, actually. I don't know why it's on fourth rank. fourth bullet point. But following tested recipe is very, very, very important, mostly because that is going to dictate how safe and how good quality product that's going to be, your product is going to be, right? The next step is going to be stirring. And what I mean by stirring is that you're going to change the trays, you are going to flip the food, and things like that, just to make sure that your food product on the trays or the surface is evenly drying at the same time, right? You don't want few pieces of fruits being more dry than the other, because if you do that, you may actually contaminate the product when you're storing it at the later time, right? Check again. You have to check it again and again to make sure it looks good, it's very well dried, and cool at the room temperature and store. And I think this is where sometimes people forget, this step people forget to do, mostly because you get it out from the dryer. It's not that dehydrator, it's not that hot, but it's still warm enough, and they pour it in their container and then they store it. What's happening is that the food is still slightly warm. It's going to create condensation, and what condensation is? It's a moisture. And if there's a moisture in your container, in your food, it's going to create mold growth. So just be very careful when you get your food out from the dry dehydrator or oven or whatever method you use. Let it cool down completely at the room temperature, and then you actually pour that product into your respective, vacuum sealed jars or bags. Some of the considerations for you to think about when you're thinking about dehydration is temperature first. Your temperature should be 140 degrees Fahrenheit and below. It shouldn't be higher than that, because if it goes higher than that, you are basically cooking your food and you're not exactly drying your food. There's a very minute difference between the two, so you don't want to do that. So if you're using oven method, which we'll talk about later, make sure your oven has that lower of a temperature, because many times they don't actually have that setting, that low of a temperature setting. So first of all, look at that first, right? The other thing that happens if you're not being patient, and if you're rushing the process, what's going to happen is that it's going to actually cause case hardening. So what does case hardening mean? Think about it this way. You have a very pretty sliced peach that you're trying to dehydrate, right? If you're using a higher temperature range than what it is asking you to do, the surface of the slice of the peach is going to get nice and dry, almost hard. And inside, it will still have some pulp, which is soft and mushy. So what does that mean? That means is that it's not fully dehydrated. And guess what's going to happen when you're storing that food, right? It's that moisture is because of the moisture already present in the slices, it's going to create spoilage in the later time by growing mold or bacteria or anything else. So be very careful and don't rush the process. It's just not worth it, right? The other factor to consider is humidity. Drying and humidity, they are enemies. They should not be together at the same time. Very important, and that is the reason why if you are within Maryland or East Coast or West Coast near water, then you should not be using outdoor method of drying, mostly because we are living in a humid environment, and where the humidity exists, you can't do proper drying. So for our central and Midwest states, which is mostly drier and hotter temperatures, you guys can do the sun drying, solar drying, and other forms of outdoor drying. But in Maryland and other coastal states, please do not even consider this. The third and very important part is air circulation. And this is that one factor that differentiates cooking versus drying. When you're cooking, you do not need air to cook the food, right? You can still cook the food at 140 and below. It will take time, but it's still going to cook, right? But the air circulation, when you add air circulation with a lower temperature, it starts to dry the food. It doesn't cook the food, right? So that's a very, very important thing to remember, right? Let me say, I'm gonna address the questions right after the slide. So give me just a second. I'm looking at some questions, so I'll get back to you, Debbie. I'm seeing your question here, so just hold on a second. The other thing to, oh, sorry. The other thing to think about is tested recipes and using those. It is very, very important to do that, mostly because, again, they are lab tested. They have been looked at through different variables like temperature, humidity, circulation, acidity, so many other factors. So they are lab tested. So it's very, very important to look through that. The other thing, those tested recipes are basically they are FDA and USDA, standards approved, and meaning they follow those guidelines, which is very important. And any recipes you see, whether it's on the blog, even on the extension page or USDA page or National Center of Home Food Preservation page, mostly they won't have that. But if in case you see them and it was posted before 1997, please do not use that. Though our standards have changed, our safety standards have changed after 1997. So you should not be following any of the resources before that. So be very, very careful on that. I'm going to post all the links of these websites or the books, so you can go and look through that. Okay, and let me see what question I have here. Okay, UOM have drawing. Okay, Debbie, can you explain the question again? I think I'm misunderstanding. Does UOM have drying times for different product? Can you type it again and maybe provide a little bit of detail on what you're trying to ask? I would appreciate that. Thank you. All right, that's the only one question I have so far. Okay, so I'm going to move forward till I hear back from Debbie again. All right, so now we dive into the main part, and that's on methods of drying foods. And I'm pretty sure you guys are interested in this segment more than anything else. So there are two different methods of drying foods. One is outdoor, the other is indoor. So in the outdoor part, you have vine drying, you have sun and solar drying. In the indoor, you have room drying, oven drying, dehydrator, and microwave drying. So these are four of them. Now, as I mentioned before, that outdoor drying is actually not permitted and recommended in the coastal states, including Maryland. We are very close to water body, and our humidity levels are usually very high. So that's why outdoor drying is actually not recommended in our state, in the Maryland state. But please check with your other extension. If you're not from Maryland, if you're from other state, please check with your local extension agency, and ask them if you could actually dry the food or not. And if you want me to figure that out for you, comment on this live chat, and I'll look into the matter. I'll look at the humidity level in your state, and I'll be able to guide you there too. So, you can always rely on your local extension agencies. They're amazing. Just like we have Maryland, every single state have their own extension agencies, and they are doing amazing work in the food preservation area too. Okay, so let's go to individual drying method now, right? So we start with vine. Even though it doesn't apply, I still want to give you some information on what those are, right? Vine drying is basically used for your beans and lentils, and usually you need over 85. Okay, that's not 850 Fahrenheit. It's 85 degree Fahrenheit and higher. I'm sorry about the typo. You need consistent weather for over 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So, which is again very peculiar to certain states within the United States. Not all states have this consistent temperature range for a longer period of time, right? Again, as I said before, drying takes time, and especially outdoor drying takes longer than indoor drying, because indoor You have more controlled environment. Outdoor, it's dependent on external and environment. So in literal sense, so it takes much longer than the indoor one. So consistent 85 degrees and higher temperature. It's low cost because you're not doing anything. All you're doing is hanging your lentils and beans in their shells, right? And let it dry on its own and let Mother Nature do its thing to dry that product. It takes several days and may take additional drying too. Again, you can give it a little bit of help and add maybe oven drying or dehydrated drying to make make the dehydration process faster. But still, overall, the process takes very, very long time. The second process is solar drying, and this is something maybe you might have heard about. In this method of drying, you can actually dry fruits with high acid and sugar, mostly because high sugar and acid acts a protective layer, protective factor for our food item to sustain outside and not cause any spoilage in the period of drying process. So it's really wonderful. The weather requirement for that type of drying is between 105 degrees to 115 degrees under direct sun. Again, we are having some cloudy days and some bright days right now in Maryland, right? So again, that's another reason why it cannot be done here in Maryland. The one thing that you can do when you're doing solar drying is you can actually DIY that project. All you're doing is getting a food grade trays and racks, and you're placing them in an encased container, and you're placing your food in layers, in single layer on individual rack. And what that does is that enclosed space is going to absorb more light and more and create more heat, and in turn it's going to dry the food much faster. It's a little bit more controlled than the vine drying, because in vine drying the food is literally exposed to external environment, and here it's in an enclosed place, so it's a little bit better. The next one is sun drying. Sun drying is another method. It's very similar to solar drying, but in solar drying you have an encased a box or a container that is housing your food. In sun drying, you are literally using food grade rack or a tray, and on top you're actually layering your food, and basically your food is going to be between the two layers of rack. So again, it's still exposed enough, and so it's low cost. Again, the temperature range is the same. You can only do fruits with high sugar and high acid with it. You have to turn the food more often, and the air quality is one factor. Again, with solar, it's a closed space, so maybe the air quality is not going to be that big of a factor than sun drying and the vine drying. So very, very important. Again, you need consistent weather, between 105 115, which is a very high temperature, if you ask me, for our Maryland standards. We mostly get like maybe get close to like 90 degrees or slightly over that for maybe 1 or 2 days, and that's it. So it's not conducive. This method is not conducive in Maryland and many parts of United States. All right, so now let's look at room drying. Now we are transitioning into something that we can do, and it is room drying. And the best part about room drying is that you can do it anywhere as long as you have a house with controlled environment, meaning you have AC and thermostat that adjusts the temperature, and you have a good air quality within your house. You are good to go. You can do this 365 days a year, and you can dry the food. So different kinds of food items can be dried indoor. The very first thing is herbs, unshelled nuts, hot peppers, and partially dried food. So partially dried foods are something that may have been, let's say, you have used dehydrator, and now you're just taking that out and when it's partially dried, and now you are drying them in the room. You can do it that way too. So you're combining two different methods of drying to make sure the dried fruits are very nicely dried, adequately dried, right? So you can do that. So It's very low cost, very, very low cost, and mostly you're going to need trays, paper bags, and string. And again, it's dependent on the air quality. So I have actually got my paper bag setup that I can actually show you on how to do it. So let's see, I'm going to go back a little bit. So I have a little bit of cilantro here, fresh cilantro. I haven't trimmed it, but that will be the first thing I do when I start drying this cilantro, right? I'm going to trim them from top, not too much. I want the branch to be intact as much as possible. And so I have that. I'm going to wash it, trim it, dry it a little bit on the paper towel, right? And then to prep my brown bag, I have pierced holes in it. I don't know if you can see it. I pierced holes on all 4 sides of the bag, leaving the bottom part as is. I haven't pierced any holes here, mostly because what's going to happen is when you're close to drying your herbs completely, many times the leaves actually fall at the bottom part. So if you have holes there, it might actually just skip the holes and fall on the floor. So this is where it's going to contain all your dried leaves if they fall from the stem. So what you're going to do, you're going to pierce holes, and then you're going to take this cilantro and you're going to insert that right here. As I said before, you're not going to cut it too much. You only cut as much as you need, maybe 1 or 2 inches, and not more than that. And what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that the length is enough and the leaves or the end of the plant or the cilantro is not touching the bottom. It's staying in air and it's not touching the bottom part. And the last but not the least, you are going to use a thread. Sorry about that, it fell. I'm going to use a thread and you're going to tie that up. And now you can hang this in any part of the house which receives a dry air, which doesn't receive any kind of humid air. So not in the kitchen, because in the kitchen we boil water and we do a lot. Not near the bathroom because we take shower, right? So this should be in a place which is mostly dry and it receives a very good ventilation, ventilation of air. And it's not in front of sun too, because sun is going to create color changes in the product. So you don't want that either. So dark, dry, well ventilated area. Okay. The next one is oven drying. So oven drying is interesting, mostly, and this is even though it is permitted. You can absolutely do this method. However, it's not my favorite method because of many reasons, and I'm going to tell you that why. You can basically do oven drying for vegetables and meat products. You have to make sure the oven is indoors, of course, and there's a low humidity within your kitchen, which is a very low chance because we are cooking too. Sometimes we have our oven in the kitchen, right? And we are boiling, we are steaming, we are doing many things. So that area, that kitchen tends to be highly humid area, just like our bathrooms where we take shower, right? So it's really hard to maintain that low humidity. The other thing is that, and I mentioned this in the earlier slide, is that you need to have a lower temperature setting between 140 to 150. And I know many ovens actually don't have such low temperature settings. So that's the first thing. If you're even considering to use oven to dry your food, that's the first thing you should check, is that does it go down to that temperature or not. So that's another thing. So what you're going to do now is that you're going to take a cookie sheet, you're going to pre-treat your food as per the tested recipe. You're going to layer it in a single layer, and you're going to actually put liner and put your food in a single layer. You're going to put on some cooking spray too if you need it. And then this is where it gets me, this method gets me. You have to keep the door of the oven slightly open, like maybe 2 or 3 inches open. Part of the reason is that oven usually doesn't have air circulation within it unless you have convection oven. Convection oven, yes, you can absolutely do drying in it. You should look at their manual and make sure that it says that you can. So if you have convection oven, you are in a good luck. But if you have a conventional oven, you're not going to have that air circulation. So it's going to be really hard for you to dry in the oven. So here is what you're going to do if you have a conventional oven. You're going to leave the door open. You're going to set the temperature. Place your cooking sheet with the food on the racks of the oven. You're going to leave the door slightly open for about 2 to 3 inches. And you're going to keep a standing fan, right next to the oven, and you have to keep it on for as long as it takes for you to dry that food. So, bottom line, it's highly inconvenient method, mostly because, first of all, mostly we have combined cooking range. We have our cooking range is attached with the oven. So you cannot cook anything for however long period of time it takes, which usually it's going to take about 12 to 18 hours. So you may not be able to cook your food on that cooking range. Second thing, you're using so much energy. You're using electricity because you're keeping the door open. So your oven is constantly working to maintain that temperature range, right? Even if it's low, it still has to work hard to maintain that. On top of that, you're using fan for that long of a time. So in my opinion, even though it is recommended, it's not the most convenient and practical way of drying food. However, if you have convection oven where you have like a drying setting and you have a fan, you can absolutely do drying. You just have to make sure though that you're looking at the manufacturer's manual and making sure that it does have those recommendations. So do that, or call them and confirm with them that if you could do this or not. Okay? And last but not the least, I forgot, if you are using oven for that long of a time, you won't be able to use oven anyway to cook your food or bake your food. The last but not the least is dehydrator drying. Now this is one of the most common method now rising up more than ever, and even within my audiences I hear a lot of people buying dehydrator at home too. And so I hope in this session there's one thing you can take away is what features to look for when you're buying your dehydrator if you decide to do that. Dehydrator is meant to dry food, so it actually allows you to dry many different kinds of foods, whether it's fruits, vegetables, meat, nuts, dried fruits, whatever that might, herbs. You can dehydrate any kind of food that can be dried in the dehydrator. It creates a very high quality product. It's very sanitary, it's faster, and it's energy efficient because it is meant for dehydrating your food. If you look at any other methods where we talked about using oven and other methods, it is something that it is not supposed to do. But we are creating and adapting that equipment to make sure that it is drying our food better. But this equipment actually is meant for dehydration. So it has all the specs you need to dehydrate your food. Equipment cost is one of the cons here, mostly because they are slightly expensive, and it depends on what kind of dehydrator you're getting. So again, I'm going to talk about what kind and types are available in the market. So I'm going to talk about that in the later slide. But again, the cost is a factor. The one that I have, which I use for my classes, there are 9 trays of a dehydrator, and I have paid over $125 for it. So just to give you an idea of what it was. Now the prices changes every time you go up on the Amazon or Target or wherever. So this is just to give you a little bit of a frame, reference that this is the cost of the dehydrator for a capacity that I just mentioned. So what's going to happen is that when I think about the dehydrator, I always think about it as how much I'm going to use this. If I see myself using using this method of drying for every year or every few months, then this is a good investment because those are sturdy equipments. There is not much to it, and it's very sturdy. I have had my equipment since past, I would say, 2.5, 3 years now, and it's doing just fine. So doesn't need a lot of maintenance. You can always get a warranty for it. So it's very easy and straightforward equipment. So it shouldn't take too much of an effort to maintain it. So I see it as a one-time investment if you decide to do so, and if it is applicable to your need, which is the most important thing. The other con there is also limited capacity. If you're going for a dehydrator that is smaller and within your price range, which means you're going to have a smaller capacity, means you're not going to have as many tray to load your food item on an individual tray. And so it's going to be, a little bit of an inconvenience, because that means you have to dehydrate more and more batches. So just to let you know of that consideration too. So if you say that, yes, Dhruti, I'm going to dehydrate every season, every spring, fall, whenever, and I'm seeing myself that I need to have a dehydrator, and these are the features you want to look into. These are them. I have divided the features into two: must-haves and optional. So in the must-have situation, you need double-walled metal or heavy-duty plastic material. So your dehydrator should be made with one of those. The second thing, it needs to have enclosed heating. Enclosed heating is going to ensure it's safe and it's easy to clean. So that's very, very important. The third is countertop design. You should be able to rest your dehydrator on the counter. It should be very easy to carry and handle. So that's very important too. The other is a temperature regulator. Your meat is going to require higher temperature for dehydration than your herbs, right? So that the temperature dial is going to help you to adjust the temperature accordingly. So that needs to be there on your dehydrator. Of course, you need a UL seal of approval. It needs to be, any equipment should have, a good equipment should have that seal. It should be washable mesh trays. Most of the mesh trays are made with plastic, so they're very easy to clean. You can even toss them in the dishwasher on gentle cycle. You're good to go. And if you don't want to do dishwashing, you can easily, use your, you can easily wash it by hand too. It is very low maintenance. It doesn't take too much time. Other optional features to think about are auto shut off, timer. Good feature, very good feature, but it's expensive. When I was looking for my dehydrator for my workshops, I looked at those and it had about $70 difference then. Now again, that's just from when I got it. Prices may have changed now, but when I was looking at it, just because of that one feature, I was paying $70 extra. So I decided not to do that. I have my film, I can always set my timer there, right? So that's what I did. The other good feature to have, which is going to cost you a little bit more, not as much as $70, is going to be the warranty for the maintenance. If you are planning to use this equipment for a number of years and use it consistently, then you definitely need a warranty for it. So look into that too. Every manufacturer will have a different kind of warranty to it. So you can look into that too. And now we are going to talk about the types of dehydrator. So let me just tell you one thing quickly. Horizontal airflow and vertical airflow are the two main kinds of dehydrator that is available in the market right now. So as the name suggests, horizontal airflow dehydrators are the ones where the air is moving on a horizontal plane, and vertical flow goes up and down, right? So it moves air in up and down fashion. So these are the two designs available right now in the market. No matter what manufacturer you go for, these are the two types you will have it available. So in the horizontal airflow, it reduces the flavor mixing, mostly because, think about it this way. You have 9 trays, right? In those 9 trays, you have 2 trays of strawberries, 2 trays of blueberries, 2 trays of peaches, right? You don't want your strawberries, your peaches to taste like strawberries, right? So what happens is that because the air is flowing in a horizontal plane, it keeps the flavor within itself. It contains it within itself. within the trays itself. So it's not mixing it up. On the vertical flow though, because the air is moving from up and down in the vertical plane, it's going to mix up the flavor. The chances of mixing up the flavor is much higher because of the movement of itself. Horizontal airflow will allow you to have a more uniform drying because of the air movement, whereas in the vertical, you have to often change the trays because most of the times the heating elements are either at the bottom or either at the top. So the top one, if let's say it's on the top trays are going to get dry much faster than the bottom one, right? So you have to continuously move the trays as much as possible. So I would say, let's say if you're doing peaches, which takes about 48 hours to dry, every 2 hours you have to go back and remind yourself to change the trays. Very, very important. So overall, in my opinion, horizontal airflows dehydrators are a little bit better by functionality. However, they also are more expensive. So again, both of them are recommended. If you can put a little bit more hard work and if you have a small budget, then I would ask you to get vertical one and just, pay close attention to your food. That's all you need to do. So just be careful on that. All right, so this is the image for the type of dehydrator. On the left side, you can see the one that's rectangular in shape. Okay, so in the rectangular shaped dehydrator, you can see the air is coming from the back or the side. So again, that is very, very helpful. On the right side, the circular one, you're seeing that the air is coming from the bottom part. Again, with bottom heating element or airflow, it is also very hard to clean too. I have noticed that because I used to have, long time ago, I used to have that kind of a dehydrator, and it created a mess, especially whenever I did like my fruit leather or any kind of fruit item with the syrup on it or something like that. So it's going to create a little bit of mess at the bottom. But with the horizontal one, it's much more easier. Okay, so now actually we go to storing. And for storing, this is very, very important, mostly because you have to make sure if you're using dehydrator, you're preheating your dehydrator first. And the same goes for oven too. You have to make sure it is at the temperature which you want to start dehydrating at. So you have to make sure it's preheated very well before you place your food in the trays. So follow the temperature guidelines based on your tested recipe. And as I already said before, it's very, very important to do that. Cool the product down to room temperature. Again, very important because if you don't do that, there might be a chance of condensation, which is going to add moisture to your product and hence increases the chances of spoilage, right? And store your food in a cool and dark place, in a dry place. Very important. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna actually open this time to maybe take a quick poll, just one question survey. If you can do that for me, that'll be amazing. So in order for you to do the poll, you will open your text app, and then where you put in the contact number of an individual, you're going to put 22333, and in the text message section where you type your message, you're going to add DP200, and you're going to hit send. When you hit send, Poll Everywhere is going to send you a response saying you're part of the poll now. Again, this Poll Everywhere app is actually going to allow me to only see your responses and not your number or information. So it's completely anonymous. And if you have done this, we can move to a question. So this is the question that I'm trying to gain your feedback on. So the question is, I feel blank in applying information shared during this Facebook Live session. And your options are very confident, somewhat confident, not at all confident. when you are sending the text again to send your response, you're only going to write A, B, or C. You don't have to type in the entire statement. So once your Poll Everywhere gives you confirmation that you're part of a survey, just type in A, B, or C and hit send again, and it's going to send me your feedback. And that should be it. So again, I want to thank all of you to joining me during live sessions. I see some of the familiar names here too. So thank you for coming back if you have. And if this is your first time attending, please go to our live section of the Lower Shore Extension page, and you will be able to catch up on the previous two preservation method on canning and freezing. We have had a very good discussion, and there were some of the new tricks that I actually shared on freezing and a good scientific information on canning. Again, this whole food preservation topic area is based on our research-based information. And as a University of Maryland Extension program, our food preservation program is part of a Educated Preserve It. And as we have on the middle section, you can see our website link. Go check that out. It has plenty of information on all the methods that I just discussed in three different areas. Also, share the information if you think that this is important. This is going to be helpful to your friends on the Facebook, and tag your friends again. To pass the knowledge and to see if they are interested to learn more about methods like this. Again, follow us on Facebook with the Lower Shore Extension page and UMD Extension, which is our overall extension homepage. We are posting constantly on a variety of topics on agriculture, finance, environmental issues. We are talking about COVID-19 right now and how we can help each other and stay safe, and several more topics. So please like us and follow us, and we make sure that we'll provide you all the good information that you need in the current times. And I wish you all a very, very wonderful day. I'm going to go back in the comment section to see if there are any questions, and I'm going to type those answers for those individuals. If you even are watching this video after the live session, please don't hesitate to type in your question, because I'll be going back to the live video and then I'm going to respond back to you. All right? Will you share recipes online? Yes. So this is a good idea. So from next week onwards, we are trying to add more nutritional content. We have a number of ideas that me and my colleagues who are in the nutrition field are trying to gather and provide. Some of those ideas are like, how to eat healthy, how to stretch your budget, how to, what are some of the things you need in your pantry. So we are very, very excited to offer some of those to you, and that also includes recipes. So please, that's why I'm saying, make sure you're following our page so you are not missing out on any information we are posting almost every single day of the week. So I hope that you do that, and thank you so much for all your support. Please stay healthy and well. Have a wonderful and productive day. Even if it's a harder time, I know you can persevere. So take a very good care of yourself, and everyone. Bye-bye. It was really wonderful to have you on the live session. Take care.